Hello everyone, and welcome back to Geotech Master. I'm excited to guide you through another essential topic in geotechnical engineering. Today we're discussing the world of in-situ testing. We'll explore the what, why, and how of in-situ tests, their advantages and disadvantages, and their practical uses in our field. So, what will we be answering today? Well, we'll be covering some crucial questions like, what are the main objectives of in-situ testing? How do these tests help us understand subsurface conditions? What are the main advantages and disadvantages of in-situ tests? And how do we choose the right test for the right job? Stay tuned as we discuss these important aspects of geotechnical investigations. Now, before we get started, if you haven't had the chance to watch my earlier series, Geotechnical Investigation Essentials, I strongly recommend you check that out first. Don't worry, I've provided a link in the description below for your convenience. It will give you the background knowledge that makes this new content even more understandable. We are moving onward now. And this new video is a part of planning a geotechnical subsurface investigation program. In our previous videos, we talked about the importance of subsurface investigations and the initial steps in planning them. We also touched on the differences between in situ and laboratory testing methods. If you haven't checked out our previous videos, I'd highly recommend you start there to build a strong foundation before we move forward. You can find the links in the description. Let's begin with the goals of in-situ testing. In-situ tests are carried out directly in the ground, causing minimal disturbance to the soil or rock. The primary goal of these tests is to classify soil and rock and to develop a detailed understanding of the subsurface conditions. These tests allow us to develop a stratigraphy and understand the variability of the soil layers. It's like taking a direct look at the Earth's layers without causing major disruption. Through these tests, we also try to identify any problematic soils or rocks that might pose a risk for our projects.